Hello, my friends. D.L. Anderson here. Welcome back to Transformation by Truth podcast as we share the truth concerning these last days and what you must do to save yourself from the violent times that are just ahead. Today's podcast is a word of truth accounting of the end times. The end is coming. The end is near. Today's podcast is entitled End Times 426, an intro to righteousness, part 1. The blessedness of walking in the path of righteousness for his name's sake. The podcast objectives are introduce the path of righteousness, reveal how we are blessed when we walk in the path of righteousness, and analyze the association between conformance and righteousness. This lesson contains timelines and other visuals. Therefore, if you are listening to the podcast, I advise you to watch the video version on our website or YouTube, or request a PDF of the lesson so you can add the visual effect. Lead me in the path of righteousness. Shalom, my beloved brothers and sisters, and welcome to day 246 of our exposition of lawlessness. In the most recent podcast, we revealed how you can reign over the spirit of dishonesty by unlocking the power of honesty. From now, we must move on to the next degree of lawlessness in our path. We, my friends, must take on the spirit of unrighteousness by unleashing the power of the focal degree of virtue. Enter righteousness. By definition, righteousness is the quality or state of being just, without guilt or sin, consistently executing that which is right according to the Father's will. Now, first things first, there is a lot I could say about righteousness because the scriptures have a lot to say about righteousness. Vis-a-vis, righteousness is one of the most pervasive themes of scriptural theology. Not only this, but righteousness is also the primary characteristic of the leading path within the way of holiness. Enter the path of righteousness. Psalm 23, 1-3 is revealing, Yahuwah is my shepherd, I do not lack. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in the path of righteousness for his name's sake. Proverbs 8:20, I lead in the way of righteousness, in the midst of the path of judgment, to bestow substance on those who love me, and to fill their treasuries. Proverb 11:5, the righteousness of the perfect makes his way straight, but by his own wrongness, the unjust one falls. And Proverb 12:26-28 is revealing, the righteous is a guide to his neighbor, but the way of the wrong leads them astray. In the way of righteousness is life, and in its pathway there is no death. He will make good on his word. Now, we have much to say about the path of righteousness. And so, as it is my custom, I will be quick, but not in a hurry. And yet, I do encourage you to hold on to your hats, for we will cover a great deal of material in this lesson. To begin with, these passages reveal multiple features of the path of righteousness. First of all, we are told that this path is illustrated by green pastures and still waters, a path where we do not lack and our souls are constantly restored. Now, this illustration supports my core belief that tribulations are not a facet of Yahuwah's will for his children. Trust me, tribulations are not defined by green pastures and still waters. Quite the contrary, tribulations are defined by troubled waters and stormy seas. Ergo, if you are consistently experiencing tribulations in your life and great distress, you, my friend, are not in the path of righteousness. Next, we understand from Proverb 8 that wisdom accounts for the second and final frame of the way of holiness. That is, a legendary path the Ruach has led me to designate as the wisdom road. Logistically, the path of righteousness converges with the wisdom road at the level of knowledge, a matter we will discuss in finer detail in the future in our lessons on knowledge and wisdom. What you need to know now at this time is sure. The prime objective of wisdom is to establish you on a path where you consistently demonstrate the righteousness of Elohim. And should you succeed to walk in the paths of wisdom and righteousness, Yahuwah will bless you in ways you never imagined, with treasures of this world and with treasures that are not of this world. Now, moving on, the word confirms that righteousness makes our way straight. Here lies a powerful revelation the Ruach is leading me to offer to you formally, and I encourage you to bookmark it. The way of holiness is an evolutionary path that is designed to merge with the unique destinies of the chosen elect as they demonstrate the power of righteousness. We know this because the word of truth declares the righteousness of the perfect makes his way straight. Brothers and sisters, fellow laborers within the renewed nation of Israel, hear me carefully as I say, as we were chosen to achieve perfection in the Ruach before the foundations of this world, our unique paths are made straight as we walk in the power of righteousness. And this is why we know we will have everlasting life. For look, listen, it has been written, straight is the gate, and hard-pressed is the way, which leads to life, and there are few who find it. Now, here lies the inflection and the primary reason why Yahuwah has raised up watchmen like me to proclaim the perfection of the Ruach in these last days. Proverb 11:5 reveals it perfectly, and now I will offer it to you formally. It is impossible to persistently demonstrate righteousness if you are not being perfected in the Spirit. Now, the key word in this inflection point is persistently. Trust me, it doesn't take a lot for people to do what they know is right for a day or two or for a season. But remember, we are not saved for a day or two or for a season. Quite the contrary, we are saved for eternity. This is why Proverb 12 is revealing life is in the path of righteousness, and thus we conclude we must perfect righteousness in the spirit of Elohim, the same way we must perfect all the degrees of holiness. To wit, we must perfect our faith, our hope, our trust, our reliance, and every other degree of holiness. For, as you very well know by now, the man or woman who is not committed to perfecting holiness will eventually operate in lawlessness, and he or she will migrate onto one of the many paths of unrighteousness. My dear friends, you must believe me. This is not something you want to do. Even though there is affliction and terrific pressure involved in always doing what you know is right, my dear friend, you must maintain the right perspective. As I told you, in End Times 374, an intro to compliance, when your heart is truly in it, you won't look at your life from the perspective of the affliction in righteousness or any other degree of holiness. Quite the contrary. When your heart is truly in it, you will look at every form of affliction from the perspective of the reward you are gradually obtaining. For the Elohim we serve is faithful, and he will make good on his word. The boundary of the path of righteousness. Now, it is not a coincidence that the Ruach has led me to address the power of perspective when it comes to fulfilling the primary objective of righteousness, which is always doing what you know is right. Vis-a-vis, it is for the following reason, which I will offer as an inflection point. Righteousness is not only an evolution of honesty, but it is also the primary application of conformance. This speaks to another dimension of our quest at the detailed level. Along these lines, righteousness as the primary application of conformance reveals the following, which I will also offer as an inflection point. Our persistent conformance to the Father's will always result in righteousness. That is, you doing what you know is right according to the Father's will. Now, there are many ways we can validate this truth. For the sake of time, I will only address two. First and foremost, we know that righteousness is the focal degree of virtue, and conformance is the focal degree of obedience. Ergo, the same way virtue is the primary application of obedience, righteousness must be the primary application of conformance. The same rule applies to trust and conformance, for obedience is the primary application of faith. Believe me, you should never conform to the will of any man or woman if you don't trust them. You're not too wise if you do. Now, this brings me to my second point, vis-a-vis the standards and rules governing the spirit of conformance are all factors of truth. We analyze this matter in End Times 377, an intro to conformance, part 2, which was posted on November 27th, 2024. Along these lines, we revealed that conformance is the railing system that serves as a barrier between the way of holiness and the troubles of this world. And we analyze two key attributes of this railing system. First and foremost, we came to see how the railing system of conformance is made up of all the standards of truth. Ergo, as righteousness is the application of conformance, it must also be centered on all the standards of truth. And this is confirmed, for righteousness is an evolution of honesty, which is, and I quote, the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Now, this brings us to the second attribute of the railing system of conformance, which is indeed a revelation. And I will offer it as such in this podcast. If you didn't bookmark it then, I advise you to bookmark it now. The railing system of conformance is dynamic, vis-a-vis, it is activated as we walk in compliance to the standards of the Father's will. Ergo, the moment you stop walking in compliance is the moment you will notice your railing system is becoming obsolete and disconnected, and eventually it will all disappear. Now, the key takeaway is sure. The railing system is not only dynamic, but it is also the boundary of the path of righteousness. And we know this because the scriptures confirm that the path of righteousness, like the railing system of conformance, is dynamic. We prove this in Proverbs 11:5. Ergo, we can now validate the association of application between these two degrees of holiness. To wit, where there is no conformance, there can be no righteousness. Now, I said all of that to prove how your perspective, i.e., a feature of your mind, is front and center in your ability to walk in the path of righteousness, i.e., a feature of your heart. Besides the fact that your mind and heart are connected, it is because righteousness, i.e., a feature of your heart, is the application of conformance, i.e., a feature of your mind. And if you think that is deep, let me tell you something. We are still operating at a very high level. Trust me, the depth of the wisdom of Elohim is unsearchable, and the truth we have been blessed to share could easily be considered as petty practice. Romans 11:33 is revealing, oh, the depth of riches and wisdom and knowledge of Elohim, how unsearchable are his judgments and his ways past finding out. Now, here is the final word. Oh, 'tis sweet to walk in this pilgrim way, a path revealed from day to day. Brothers and sisters, hear me carefully as I say, as wonderful as it is to walk in the path of righteousness, many within our nation are refusing to walk in it. No doubt, there are many reasons why this is the case, and yet the focal reason is centered on trust. To wit, even though he has given us many precious promises, the majority of men and women in this nation don't believe he will make good on them. Remember, actions speak louder than words. To wit, your actions tell the true tale of what is really going on in your heart. And when you refuse to walk in the path of righteousness, you are telling Yahuwah that he is not trustworthy. Here lies the biggest problem of all time, and we touched on it during this lesson. Vis-a-vis, righteousness is the primary application of conformance, and Conformance is the primary application of trust. Ergo, where there is no trust, there can be no righteousness. This is why doubters and fearmongers cannot walk in the path of righteousness. It's because they fail the primary requirement upon abiding in this way. They don't trust the author and finisher of our faith. Now, if that is you, I advise you to reconsider Proverbs 12, which reveals life is in the path of righteousness. And thus, if you cannot find it within yourself to walk in this narrow way, you are worthy of endless death, and this death you shall have. Until then, I recommend, don't be discouraged. These are the last days, and this is no time to be weak. Quite the contrary, this is a time to be encouraged and to stay strong in our pursuit of the kingdom and his righteousness, which we seek. Now, here is today's assignment. Meditate on the word you have heard today. And as always, ask the Father to reveal the truth to you. For the children of Elohim live by conviction. And if he has not convicted you, or if you had not heard him concerning these matters, you should pray until you do. Today, I want you to meditate on the word I have shared. We covered a lot of material, so feel free to listen to the podcast a second time if needed. And if you are led, take notes or request a copy of my notes. Most importantly, I want you to focus on all the scriptures I shared in this lesson. And if you are led, do your own study on the topic of righteousness, for there is a wealth of knowledge I did not touch on for the pure sake of time. Now, here is what's next. We completed today's podcast, End Times 426, an intro to righteousness, part 1. And the next podcast is entitled End Times 427, an intro to righteousness, part 2. I will post this podcast on Wednesday, March 5th, 2025. Until then, my friends, continue to be led by the Spirit of Elohim. Continue to watch, continue to pray, continue in fasting, and most of all, continue to be focused, for the end is coming. The end is near.